My future mother-in-law doesn't want her son to marry me because, in her words, I'm defective. I'm 32 years old and I have a medical condition that I don't usually talk about with strangers, but here we are. Basically, I have all the correct anatomical parts, but none of them actually work the way they're supposed to. My uterus cannot generate lining, which means I can never get pregnant. On the bright side, if you can call it that, I've never had a period in my entire life. No cramps, no tampons, no unexpected surprises. Just permanent, medically confirmed infertility. My boyfriend and I have been together for an incredibly long time. We first met when I was 9 years old 23 years ago, when my family moved to America from Germany. Our relationship grew slowly from childhood friendship into something romantic as we got older. We dated through high school, went to college together, and moved in together after graduation. I've never dated or been with anyone else, and as far as I know, neither has he. He's been my entire world for more than 2 decades. We waited so long to get married because honestly it just wasn't important to us. We were already committed, already living together, already planning our future. A piece of paper didn't feel necessary. That changed recently when my dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He's German, my mom is American, and they originally met when she went to Germany for work. I was born there and lived there during my early years before we moved to the States. My dad, knowing his time was limited, expressed his wish to walk me down the aisle before he became too ill to do so. I'm his only daughter, and that request broke my heart in the best and worst way possible. So we started planning a wedding. That's when everything fell apart. My boyfriend's mother, who I'll call Barbie because I can't bring myself to use her real name, somehow found out about my condition. I don't know exactly how she discovered it. She may have overheard a family member talking about it at some gathering. My family knows about my condition, as do several members of his family that I felt close enough to confide in over the years. Medical issues aren't exactly dinner table conversation, but when you've been with someone's family for over 2 decades, these things sometimes come up. When Barbie found out and confronted me about it, she didn't ask questions or express concern or offer support. No, she immediately forbade her son from marrying me because I couldn't provide him with children. Just like that. As if I were a defective appliance being returned to the store, not a human being who had been part of her son's life for most of his existence. Let me be clear. My boyfriend and I had discussed my infertility extensively years ago. We'd had long, honest conversations about what it meant, how we felt about it, what our options were. While he admitted to being a bit disappointed at first, which is completely understandable and human, we were fine with it. We talked about adoption in the future. We talked about fostering. We'd even had a friend generously offer to be a surrogate if we ever wanted biological children. We had plans. We had options. We had each other. That was what mattered. But apparently none of that was good enough for Barbie. She started telling all her family members not to attend our future wedding. She went on a campaign, calling relatives, sending messages, explaining in dramatic detail that she didn't want her son marrying someone defective, who couldn't give him what he supposedly wanted or needed. Never mind that her son was a grown man perfectly capable of deciding what he wanted. Never mind that he'd already made that decision years ago. Never mind that we'd been together since we were children and had built an entire life together. I kept hearing that word. Defective. Over and over again. Defective. Like I was a broken machine, a faulty product, something less than human because my reproductive system doesn't function the way nature intended. If she could come around and change her mind on this, that would be wonderful. But as it stands now, I don't want her at the wedding. I'm terrified she might do or say something to ruin the event, to humiliate me in front of everyone, to make what should be a celebration of love into a referendum on my worth as a woman and a wife. My boyfriend says that while he loves his mother, he's torn about whether to invite her or not. We've even discussed having just a quick civil ceremony, inviting only a few close friends and relatives and telling her afterward. But the problem runs deeper than wedding invitations. She doesn't even want to come over when we invite her for dinner anymore. She's treating me like I'm contagious, like my infertility might somehow spread to her if she spends too much time around me. His father is okay with our marriage, thank God. His aunts and uncles are mostly understanding. We've talked extensively about adoption in the future. But Barbie is also vehemently against that because an adopted child wouldn't be his blood, and therefore wouldn't really be her grandchild. As if love and family are purely matters of genetics, as if the bonds we choose to create don't matter at all. 2 days after I first shared my situation, I received 2 text messages that perfectly encapsulated the division in my boyfriend's family. One good, one absolutely terrible. The good one came from my future father-in-law, and reading it made me cry in the best way. He wrote that he was appalled by his wife's actions, that he loves me like the daughter he never had, and that he thinks his son is incredibly fortunate to have found me. Those words meant more to me than I can possibly express. To know that at least one of his parents sees me as a complete person, not just a malfunctioning incubator, gave me hope that maybe we could get through this. The second message was from his aunt, my boyfriend's father's sister. She essentially said the same supportive things as her brother, but then added something that made my stomach drop. She told me that Barbie, her sister-in-law, had spoken to her about the whole situation, asked her not to attend the wedding, and then made a comment that I'm still struggling to process. Barbie apparently said, "Why does she even have breasts since it's not like she's going to use them for anything?" I sat staring at that text message for a long time, reading it over and over, trying to comprehend the level of cruelty required to say something like that about another human being. Reducing me to body parts, to biological functions, to nothing more than a potential baby-making vessel. The hatred in those words was palpable. My boyfriend asked me not to come to the confrontation he was planning with his mother that evening. He thought my being there would make things worse, would turn the conversation into an attack on me rather than a discussion about her behavior. So after work I went home, ordered a pizza, curled up on the couch and watched mindless TV while petting my cat. That last part is not a euphemism, by the way. I genuinely find comfort in playing with and petting my cat. His purring and warmth were exactly what I needed while my boyfriend tried to talk sense into his mother. I had no idea that conversation would destroy everything. 2 days later, my entire world collapsed. My boyfriend and his father were supposed to sit down with Barbie on Tuesday night to try to talk sense to her, to make her understand that her behavior was unacceptable, that she was hurting both of us, that she needed to either accept our relationship or step back from it. I had hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe his father's support would make a difference, that maybe she would see reason. She won. I don't know exactly what happened or what was said during that conversation. I wasn't there. But whatever transpired in that room changed everything. My boyfriend came home, and the moment he walked through the door I could see it in his face. Something was different. Something was wrong. We got into a big fight. Despite everything we had discussed before, despite years of accepting my condition and making plans together, he suddenly said that he wanted kids. Real kids. Biological kids. And if I couldn't provide them, the wedding was off. I stared at him, barely recognizing the man standing in front of me. "That sounds like your mother talking, not you," I said, my voice shaking. He looked me dead in the eye and replied, "I can speak for myself." It escalated into a shouting match. Years of love and trust and shared history seemed to evaporate in minutes. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't believe that after everything we'd been through, after 2 decades together, he was choosing his mother's bigotry over our relationship. I quickly packed a bag with trembling hands and went to my parents' house for the evening. I called in sick to work the next day and just laid in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. 23 years. 23 years of friendship and love and building a life together, and it had all come crashing down because his mother decided I was defective. We first met when I was 9 years old. Our relationship grew from innocent childhood friendship into something romantic as we matured. We dated through all of high school, navigating first loves and teenage drama together. We went to college together, studied together, supported each other through exams and papers and anxiety. We moved in together after graduation, combining our furniture and our lives and our dreams. I've never dated or been with anyone else, and as far as I know, neither has he. He was my entire romantic history, my only experience of love. We had waited so long to get married because it genuinely wasn't important to us as long as we were together. The relationship mattered, not the ceremony. That changed when my dad was diagnosed with terminal illness and expressed his wish to walk me down the aisle before he became too sick to do so. I'm his only daughter. How could I deny him that? But now there would be no wedding. No walk down the aisle. No happy ending. I made a decision in those dark hours staring at my ceiling. I decided to leave. Not just leave him, but leave the entire state. Leave the country, actually. On Monday, I would give 2 months' notice at work to give them time to find and train my replacement. Then I would move back to Germany. I still have friends and family there, People who know me and love me and won't reduce me to my reproductive capabilities. My friend, the one who had volunteered to be a surrogate, has offered to let me stay in her spare room with her family until I get settled on my own. I know I could move elsewhere in town or even to another city in the state. But I don't want to be alone here. There are too many memories in this place. Every street corner, every restaurant, every park reminds me of him, of us, of the life we were supposed to build together. I have a strong support network of friends and family overseas. That's where I need to be. 2 days later, during my lunch hour, I had to run to the grocery store to pick up some things for my mom for dinner tonight. At the grocery store, who should I happen to run into but Barbie herself, the woman who could have been my mother-in-law. I don't know what to call her anymore, so Barbie it is. I was walking down an aisle, minding my own business, trying to remember if Mom wanted the regular pasta or the whole wheat, when Barbie suddenly appeared at the other end. We made brief eye contact. For a split second I saw something flash across her face. Maybe surprise, maybe guilt, maybe nothing at all. Then she immediately turned and bolted out of there like I was contagious. I guess she had nothing to say to the defective woman who ruined her son's life. The second thing was both touching and mortifying. My dad came with me to the house I'd shared with my ex to help me pack up my things. He's already agreed to act as my representative when the house is sold to ensure I get my fair share. While we were there, he stood in the corner glaring at my ex the whole time with this intense, protective father energy that would have been comforting if the whole situation wasn't so awful. Then my ex had this brilliant idea to ask for one last time, right in front of my father. As if sex could somehow fix 2 decades of relationship ending. As if physical intimacy could paper over betrayal and cruelty. I guess I kind of snapped. Years of being called defective, of having my worth reduced to my reproductive system, of being treated like less than human, all came bubbling to the surface. I grabbed my sweater, you can probably guess what part of me was right underneath it, and said loudly, "You are never going to see these, much less touch them, play with them, or anything else." He turned absolutely red and walked out the door without another word. After he left, my dad went from giving my ex a, "You hurt my daughter and you're lucky to be alive," look to bursting out in laughter once the door closed. He then said, "I can't believe you just did that." "Neither can I replied, and we both started laughing, that slightly hysterical laughter that comes when you're processing trauma and don't know how else to release it. We then went home for dinner with my mom. Halfway through the meal, my mom asked an innocent question. "What does Vanessa's husband do again?" "Vanessa is the friend I'm moving in with in Germany." I just lost it. It was a perfectly innocent question, but hearing the word husband broke something inside me. I let it all out in big heaving sobs. All the grief and pain and loss came pouring out of me in waves. After a while, my dad came over and carried me upstairs to bed just like he used to do when I was 5 years old and had nightmares. I'm typing this now on my laptop from that same childhood bed. I told him to let Mom know that she did nothing wrong, that I just needed to let it all out, and unfortunately for her, that was the moment it happened. He felt terrible, but these things have their own timing. A lady at work has already volunteered to take my cat, which breaks my heart, but I know it's the right thing. My dad will store things like my tennis trophies, yearbooks, and photos upstairs at his house. He said that even though I may not want those photos now, perhaps in 5 years or so I'll want them, so he's going to keep them safe until I'm ready to take them back. The next day I gave notice at work, experienced some more weirdness, and am now lying in bed with my laptop trying to process everything. While at lunch, a dozen roses arrived with a note that simply said, "I'm sorry." No more, no less. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. I asked my coworker if she would like them to give to her little daughter at home. When she said, "No, I know why you got them and I don't feel right taking them," into the trash they went. Note and all. I was going to wait until Monday to give notice. But the gossip factory at work has been running full-time over the last couple of days. Everyone knows. Everyone is talking. So I went and told my boss that I'm leaving, but I'll stay to help train a replacement. My last day is ironically Valentine's Day. What the hell? I've got nothing else to do that day. I'll spend 2 weeks after that here saying goodbye to people, going to a few of my favorite places in town, trying to find closure. Then on February 29th, my parents are going to drive me to Chicago, about 4 hours away. I leave for Munich on March 1st. My friend Vanessa lives in Munich, so I'll stay at her place for a few days while I try to figure out where to go and what to do. My hometown is about a 2.5-hour drive away and I still have family there. I'll decide between now and then where to base myself. It's a small town, maybe about 40,000 people. I'm not sure of the exact number, but it does have a castle and a large tin soldier museum which always made me smile as a kid. I don't know if I'll stay in Munich. More opportunities up there. Or head to my hometown and try to find something, or go somewhere else in Germany entirely like Hamburg or Berlin. I have time to figure it out. What I don't have is a reason to stay here anymore. I also went to the realtor who's selling the house and had to sign a bunch of papers giving my father authority to make any decisions regarding the sale. The lady said, "No problem, I have a lot of experience with divorcing couples." I was never even married, I thought to myself, but I just nodded and signed where she indicated. I came home and we had dinner, then my mother and I sat down and she braided my hair. It has always been our thing to do for mommy-daughter bonding time. We've done it for big moments throughout my life. When I was first diagnosed with my condition before the state tennis tournament when I went away to college. Basically, big moments. I think this counts as one of those. Then my ex's best friend called. He said he heard what happened, said it was pretty crappy, and wanted me to come over for an evening with his family before I left. I was actually closer friends with his wife than with him, but I'll go anyway. It'll be nice to say goodbye properly to at least some people. I can't thank this community enough for their support and kind words. Sorry if I branch into irrelevant topics at times, but I just type as I think and this is all going faster than I thought. Last week I thought I might have to start planning for a wedding, and now I'm planning on leaving the country and starting my life over. My mother also suggested we go to the zoo in Chicago on my last day in America. I went there when we first moved to America 23 years ago, and she thinks it would make the perfect bookend to my whole 23-year stay in this country. It seems like just yesterday when we moved into a new house and a nice boy and his mother came over, brought us a basket of cookies, and welcomed us to the neighborhood while I was out front keeping my dog away from the movers. Times and people sure do change. A week later, my ex came over to my parents' house tonight and said he wanted to talk. I have a good idea of what he hoped would happen, but it definitely didn't go the way he planned. We had a brief conversation in which he said he was sorry and I told him I was moving back home to Germany soon. He started to tear up and so did I. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain, we have 2 decades of history. You can't just turn off feelings like that. I take full responsibility for giving him the opening that led to what happened next. We were both crying and emotional vulnerability can cloud judgment. We started hugging. Just holding each other, both of us shaking with sobs. While we were hugging, I didn't notice one of his hands moving down my back to my rear until he got a good handful and squeezed it. As soon as it registered in my brain what he was doing, I stepped back and unleashed a slap. I slapped him across the face with such force that my hand still stings hours later. He staggered back looking shocked. I pointed to the door yelling, "Get out!" Though I may have added some stronger language. He looked absolutely shocked, like he couldn't believe I'd actually hit him. He hung his head and walked out the door. After I heard him get in his car, start it and drive off, I broke down in tears again. My father, who had been waiting and listening outside the room the entire time, he later explained he was standing by in case I needed backup, came in to find me crying. He gave me a big hug and my mother came downstairs and fixed us all something to drink. A few minutes later my phone rang. According to caller ID, it was Barbie, my ex's mother, the person who started all of this. I didn't answer. I couldn't deal with her right now. My father picked up instead. I didn't hear her side of the conversation, so what I know comes from what my father told me later. She essentially threatened to call the cops on me for assaulting her precious son. My father, always the calm one in a crisis, responded that it was justifiable self-defense since my ex had attacked me first with the rear grab, and that we had cameras to prove everything to the police if needed. We don't actually have cameras, but she didn't need to know that. She hung up immediately. I haven't seen a cop since, so I don't know if she was bluffing or if my dad's threat scared her off. I'll admit that I missed the physical side of my relationship with my ex. He was my first and only for so many things. First date, first kiss, first intimate partner. But none of that outweighs the hurt he and his mother have caused me. I would rather remain celibate for the rest of my life than let him touch me again. I shouldn't have let him hug me in the first place. It was a moment of weakness. I know better now and I won't let it happen again. 26 days later, one mystery finally got solved. Throughout this whole ordeal, there have been 2 mysterious things I had no answer for. 1. Why my boyfriend suddenly changed his mind after that conversation with his mother. 2. Exactly how Barbie found out about my infertility in the first place. It wasn't common knowledge. I certainly didn't tell her. I had my suspicions, but yesterday they were confirmed in the worst way possible. I was downtown on my lunch break. I've been training the new girl who's replacing me at work. She seems really nice and capable. I actually would have liked to work with her if the circumstances were different. During lunch, I ran into Steve, Jack's friend and neighbor whom he's known since he was 3 years old. Steve said he had heard about us breaking up, mentioned it was a shame, and then asked if it had anything to do with my infertility. I froze. I had not told Steve. He wasn't a close enough friend to confide in about something so personal. So I asked what he knew about my infertility. He then told me the whole story. This is from his point of view and I'm only relaying what he said, so it may not be 100% accurate, but it explains everything. Steve and Jack, my ex, were working on Steve's car one day. I don't know what kind, only that it's from the 1960s and Jack loves working on classic cars. Before this particular day, Jack and I had what you might call a very informal proposal. It was sweet and casual, various. What do you want on your toast? It looks like it's going to rain today. Should we get married? That kind of thing. But Jack wanted to do a proper proposal with an actual ring. So he went to his parents' house because he wanted an old heirloom ring that had been in his family for generations, maybe even centuries. He asked his mom where the ring was and why he wanted it. She ran upstairs crying with glee to find it. When she came back down with it, she was still crying happy tears and said it would be nice to have the pitter-patter of tiny feet around the house. She asked if I was currently pregnant. I guess it seemed odd to her that we were getting married after 16 years of dating and living together, so she assumed Jack had gotten me pregnant, prompting the proposal after so many years. Jack replied that we already had the pitter-patter of tiny feet. My cat. She said, "No, I mean a baby, silly." Jack then responded completely innocently, "Mia can't have babies," and proceeded to tell her my entire medical situation. Everything. My diagnosis, the specifics of my condition, all of it. Information I'd shared with him in confidence years ago. Information I'd trusted him to keep private. According to Steve, Barbie said something like, "This isn't going to happen," went back upstairs, returned the heirloom ring to wherever she'd gotten it from and slammed the door. The next day she forbade Jack from marrying me, started calling me defective to anyone who would listen, and kicked off this entire nightmare. After telling me this, Steve said that yes, this was one factor in our breakup. He added, "What a shame. You two made a great couple," and mentioned that Jack was probably devastated. I said goodbye and went on to lunch, though I couldn't eat anything. When I got home later that day, I went straight to my room and cried into my pillow until my father came up to get me for dinner. I had always suspected that Jack told her somehow. While my condition isn't a state secret, it's not something I've ever felt comfortable sharing casually. Now that I'm telling the story anonymously online, I have no problem admitting to complete strangers that my parts don't work. It's been oddly comforting, actually. But in real life, face-to-face, it's different. 2 months later, we'll start with the good news first. I left America on March 1st and flew to Munich. I sat next to an elderly lady who was terrified of flying but was traveling to visit her son and his family. I don't remember what he did or why he was in Germany. For the 10 or so hours we were in the air, she held my arm in a death grip anytime we hit an air pocket or experienced even slight turbulence. It was a relatively smooth flight with just a few bumps, but she gripped even tighter during those moments. Later, I discovered I had a bruise, but fortunately her nails didn't dig in. After we landed and went through customs, she reunited with her son and his family. This all happened before the quarantine and isolation began in earnest, so there wasn't much of a problem at that time with travel or gathering. Then the pandemic started and everything got complicated. I've spent most of my time at my friend Vanessa's house, tutoring her kids in English and generally helping out around the house to earn my keep. I had 3 job interviews scheduled before I arrived, but all of them were cancelled due to the lockdowns. My uncle, who lives in Kulmbach, has offered to drive the 3 hours down to Munich to pick me up and take me back there, but I haven't decided yet whether to go. Now for the bad news. Apparently Jack, my ex, has been having a very hard time with all this. Normally when my family flew back to Germany in the past, we would fly out of Cedar Rapids, connect through Chicago or Minneapolis and then fly to Germany. This time though, we drove up to Chicago and I flew directly from there. From what a friend told me, Jack drove out to the Cedar Rapids airport on the day he thought I was leaving, not knowing that we'd changed our plans. When I didn't show up, he went home and assumed he'd gotten the time or date wrong. He started sending letters to my parents' house. I had my mother open one and read it to me over the phone, but I soon asked her to stop. Even though my mother and I have always been open about my personal life, there were things in that letter I didn't feel comfortable hearing or having her read aloud. The letters stopped when Jack lost his job, for reasons unrelated to the quarantine, and later wound up in jail. No one has been able to tell me exactly what happened, but based on what I've pieced together from various sources, one night Jack got into a shouting match with his mother that escalated into a physical altercation. His dad had to physically pull him off Barbie until the cops arrived and arrested him. I guess it got bad enough that a neighbor called the police. I never would have expected this from him. He was always so quiet, so reserved, so gentle. The fact that he put his hands on his mother, of all people, is shocking beyond words. If only he'd fought this hard for me back when it mattered, maybe things would have turned out differently. As of now, I'm sitting around with not much to do, but at least I'm not in jail. I hope everyone is staying safe and doing as well as possible during these strange times. 4 days later. I had been thinking of calling Jack while I was here, but his recent troubles have made me rethink that decision. I have no idea how to call someone currently in jail, and if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I'm motivated enough to try. He only mailed those letters to my parents' house in Iowa because he has no clue, other than knowing I'm somewhere in Germany where I am right now. I'm hoping that when this virus situation blows over, I will return to America for a visit in maybe 2 years, and perhaps by then I will feel comfortable enough to see him in person. It's like he had a complete personality change, and that's what mystifies me the most. He went from quiet and reserved to some sort of unstable person I don't even recognize. I'm starting to wonder if at some point during our marriage, if it had gone through, he would have laid his hands on me like he did with his mother. That thought terrifies me. 5 days later. I actually spoke to Jack yesterday on the phone. When I last updated, he had been arrested and thrown in jail for assaulting his mother. I don't know if he's out on bail, if the charges were dropped, or what, but apparently he's been spending the last few days sitting in my parents' front yard. Just sitting there. Doing nothing but sitting. My dad said he was going to go out there and kick his rear, but my mom, who's definitely the cooler-headed of the two, went out there instead and calmly told him I was gone and that he should pick himself up and start his life over too. She called me and told me this, so I decided to call him. I did it last night. He answered and sounded kind of relieved it was me, but also incredibly sad. This is the conversation to the best of my memory. Jack, hello? Me, hello. I understand you're out in my parents' front yard. Well, I'm not there, so please leave them alone. Jack, I was hoping that the rumors I heard weren't true, that you were still here and we could talk. Me, I tried talking before and you just took it as a chance to grab my rear and act as if sex could solve this whole thing. Jack, I'm sorry. I've never broken up before, so I'm not sure how to go about it. Me, I've never broken up before either, but I think I've handled it better. I just need to know why. Jack, I have to do what my mother says, and she wasn't happy when she found out you couldn't have children. Me, you're 32 years old. I don't think you have to do what your mother says anymore. Jack, you just don't understand. Me, I do understand. We had discussed the problem before and had come up with solutions that apparently aren't satisfactory to her, so you threw our relationship away. Did it mean that little to you? Jack, you didn't have to go away. When are you coming back? Me, not for a couple of years, once this whole pandemic thing is over. If I can hopefully find a job and my own place to stay. Jack, come back please. Me, I'm sorry, but you made your choice. Barbie or me. I hope the two of you are quite happy together. Throughout all of this, he was crying and I was doing my best not to. Jack, please come back. We can get married and adopt or whatever. I'm sorry. We can find a way to work this out. Me, I told you there were always alternatives, but you threw those away along with me. Plus, Barbie's going around calling me defective and she won't accept us adopting. How does that change? Jack, you're not defective. I'm sorry, but I can't control what she thinks. Me, no, but you support what she thinks. You've known this about me since we were 16. Suddenly it's an issue? Jack, I don't like her calling you defective. In case you hadn't heard, I just spent time in jail for defending you. Me, maybe if you had done that when this all started, I'd still be there. I think that broke him because he kept quietly whispering sorry over and over, and then he hung up. I just laid on the bed and quietly cried until Vanessa's oldest child, Victoria, knocked gently and told me it was time for dinner. 3 weeks later. I moved out of my friend Vanessa's house this past weekend. Her family was incredibly kind to take me in, but when we first planned this arrangement, it was before the virus shut down the world. I thought I'd have my own place and a job and everything sorted out within a few weeks. Instead, I've been camping out in their spare room for much longer than intended, watching their groceries disappear faster with an extra mouth to feed, feeling like an increasingly unwelcome burden even though they never said so. My uncle said he would drive down from Kulmbach and pick me up, and I felt better taking his offer than continuing to impose on Vanessa's family. So he came down on Saturday, spent the night with some friends of his in Munich, and we drove back up to Kulmbach on Sunday. I'm currently staying with him and his wife, typing this out before bed. It's weird being here given that I was born in this town and lived my first 9 years here. Even when I visited on vacation in the past, it never felt as strange as it does now. I don't know if it's the deserted, pandemic-emptied feeling of the town, or my current personal situation that makes everything feel off-kilter, or some combination of both. But it just doesn't feel right. Nothing feels right anymore. Anyway, that's enough miscellaneous rambling. I'm just trying to avoid typing the real part of this story if you couldn't tell. Friday night, Jack called me. I still have the same phone and account back in Iowa, so when it rang with his distinct ringtone, the one I still haven't had the heart to change, it caught me completely by surprise. I picked it up and said, "What do you want?" Which I know was a bit rude, and I apologized to him as soon as he said, "I just wanted to see how you were doing and say hi." So we proceeded to have a relatively pleasant conversation for a few minutes. We talked about the weather, the pandemic, how strange everything felt. It was almost like old times, almost like we could be friends again someday. Then I heard screeching in the background and a voice yelling, "Is that her?" Jack said, "I'm talking. Leave me alone." Then Barbie, his mother, the woman who started all of this nightmare, got on the phone. "Leave my son alone," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Haven't you done enough damage?" I simply responded by hanging up. She must have gotten his phone and tried calling me back a few more times, none of which I answered. When I finally checked the voicemail later, she was on a full-blown rant about how I had ruined Jack's life. She listed every terrible thing that had happened to him as if it were all my fault. She said he had lost his job, which we already knew was going to happen anyway. Last year, the owner of his company announced his retirement and that he was selling off the assets, but he gave a full year's notice and even helped some employees find work elsewhere. Jack losing his job had nothing to do with me. She claimed he had lost his house. We sold our house after our breakup because neither of us could afford it alone and neither of us wanted to live there with all those memories. Again, not my fault. That was a mutual decision forced by his choice to end our relationship. She said he'd been caught drinking in public. Apparently, he bought a few bottles of alcohol, went down near the lake, drank in the park, and got busted by the police. I had heard this from another friend earlier, so it wasn't news, but hearing Barbie blame me for his drinking was infuriating. She mentioned that he had attacked her. I've covered this before, but I'd secretly hoped during that fight that he would have gotten in at least one good hit before his dad intervened. I know that's terrible to think, but after everything she put me through, I can't help it. She even managed to work in her favorite word, defective. She said that if she'd known 16 years ago that I was defective, she would have gotten her son, a nice, normal girl to be with. As if women are interchangeable parts you can just swap out when one doesn't meet specifications. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. She mentioned that Jack had been talking about suicide recently, saying things like, "There's no point in going on," and, "I have nothing left." I tried calling back immediately, but every single time Barbie picked up the phone and resumed screaming at me. After the fourth attempt, I gave up and decided to write him a letter instead. I sent it to my parents' house with instructions to deliver it directly to Jack, figuring that Barbie would intercept it if I sent it to his address. In the letter, I told him that I still loved him, because despite everything I do, you can't just erase 2 decades of love. I told him I wanted him to do well in life, to find happiness, to move forward. But I also made it clear that it was over between us. That our relationship, our romantic partnership was done. That he needed to accept that and build a new life for himself, just like I'm trying to do. I told him that his life has value, that he has so much to offer the world, that this heartbreak isn't the end of his story. I reminded him of his talents, his kindness to others, the good person I knew he could be when he wasn't under his mother's influence. I begged him to get help, to talk to someone, to not do anything permanent to solve a temporary problem. But I also told him that I couldn't be his reason to live anymore. That I couldn't be responsible for his happiness or his well-being. That he needed to find those things within himself, not in another person and certainly not in me. So here I am 5,000 miles away, civilization shut down by a pandemic, living with my aunt and uncle in a town that should feel like home but doesn't, and just waiting for the chance to put my life back together. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if Jack will get help or if he'll continue spiraling. I don't know if Barbie will ever realize the destruction she's caused or if she'll continue blaming me for everything. I don't know if I'll ever feel whole again, or if there will always be this Jack-shaped hole in my heart where 2 decades of love used to live. What I do know is that I made the right choice leaving. I know that I deserve better than being called defective. I know that my worth isn't determined by my uterus or my ability to bear children. I know that somewhere out there is a life waiting for me that doesn't involve being reduced to my reproductive system or groveling for acceptance from someone who will never give it. Thank you for reading and sorry about any formatting errors. I think I'll put my laptop away now and try to sleep, though I doubt I'll manage much of it tonight.